these spaces, these niche mass media spaces, where they're reaching people in places that we are not. So we've got to be not just in traditional media, not just in podcasts and media, but we've now got to think about how we communicate, because there is an enormous amount of misinformation, disinformation, and in some cases, just complete fabrication and lies that are being pumped out to communities, in Latino communities and other communities out there that we have no way of taking on.
2 Senate races remain uncalled at this hour, both in battlegrounds. We're going to have more details on that in just a moment. And some new hints today of the Trump administration's first order of business.
America has clearly said they expect a secure border. We want immigration, but we want it to be legal, orderly, and safe. So after the president secures the border, which I'm sure he will promptly, it's up to the Senate and the House of Representatives to then pass legislation to secure that in statute so it can't simply be opened up again.
We've got a number of reporters and analysts ready to go over all these developing storylines for us. We're going to go first to NBC's Jake Traylor, who is near Mar-a-Lago in West Palm Beach. Jake, another welcome. How's Donald Trump spending his first weekend as president-elect?
Yeah, Alex, it's pretty rare that we don't see or hear from now President-elect Donald Trump for days. And the last time we saw him on camera was last Tuesday, election night, whenever he spoke at gave his victory speech after winning the nomination, winning the presidency. And so over the past few days, we've really seen Donald Trump focused on 2 key things. One has been meeting with world leaders from across the globe, talking about his upcoming administration and how he'd interact with them. Secondly, we've seen Donald Trump focus on appointing and selecting who his cabinet members will be, who his administration is going to be in this upcoming second term that he's going to serve. And there's really been a notable shift and focus on who he's going to pick this time around. In his first term, we saw a lot of turnover in his administration, 20 different individuals that ultimately switched out from their initial appointments. This time around, Trump is focused on loyalists. Him and his transition team say they want people that will stay in his corner throughout the course of his administration. One of those individuals is his former acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, who is being considered, according to sources that NBC has spoken with, for an upcoming administration term as well. He was asked about this in an interview just moments ago. Take a listen to that.
Look, it's always a pleasure and an honor to be asked to serve, particularly by President Trump. I served him for 4 years. He is a reformer. He is a disruptor. So if asked, I would certainly be willing to serve again. I think it would be an honor of a lifetime.
Now, Alex, so far, there's really only one actual position that Donald Trump has publicly selected to serve in his upcoming administration, and it's an important one. It's the chief of staff. Donald Trump, a couple days ago, selected Susie Wiles to be his chief of staff in this upcoming administration. Now, you've probably heard the name before. She was the co-campaign manager throughout the course of this campaign. And I've been talking with sources who say she was the unanimous favorite inside of the administration and inside of the campaign as well. She brought a new level of discipline to the campaign that my sources have told me they hope she brings to this upcoming administration as well. Alex.
Yeah, understandably so. Thank you so much, Jake, for that. Let's go to NBC's Aaron Gilchrist, who's at the White House for us. Aaron, another welcome to you. So what are we learning about Trump's upcoming meeting with President Biden there?
Well, we knew from the White House that this meeting was going to happen, that President Biden had extended this invitation to former President Trump to come here to the White House. There was some question about when exactly that meeting would happen, knowing that the president is going to be leaving on Thursday for South America for the APEC and G20 summits that will be happening there. And so now we've learned this meeting will take place on Wednesday at 11 a.m., according to a statement from the White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre. This is an opportunity for the American people to see this transition in practice. We know that the government bureaucracies will be able to sort of make sure the transition happens at that level, but this really is the opportunity for the American people to see the imagery of one president standing next to an incoming president and preparing to pass the baton to that person who's coming into office. One of the big questions, though, I think, Alex, is what will this meeting look like? We know that we're coming off a campaign where these two men, when President Biden was the nominee, these two men spoke not in friendly terms about each other. And so it'll be interesting to see what exactly plays out in this meeting. In years administration transitions past, there had been lengthy conversations inside the Oval Office between the sitting president and the incoming president. We'll be interested to see how long these two men meet. When we do see them together, it'll be interesting to watch body language to see what exactly is that body language, given the fact that former President Trump did not invite President Biden to the White House when he was the president-elect. Of course, a tradition now we're returning to, where we've seen presidents from President Obama inviting former President Trump to the White House, all the way back to Jimmy Carter inviting Ronald Reagan to the White House at that transition back in the 80s, Alex.
Can I ask you if you have a sense of the tenor of things in the White House there behind you? If the post-election blues, which surely must be in existence, are maybe lighter than they would have been because of what happened on July 21st of this year. I mean, the Biden, when President Biden said that he was not going to run for re-election, as he'd been campaigning, as the entire staff was expecting him to do, there was certainly a sense of mourning after that. How bad is it now?
You're right. There was a sense of mourning after that. And then you saw the White House staff and supporters of President Biden really get behind him and say, you know what? Joe Biden did the patriotic thing by stepping aside and allowing someone else to run. At this point, there are sort of whispers about the feeling that Democrats lost the White House. At the same time, the Biden administration out front has been saying that they are committed to spending the next, 10 weeks or so of this administration doing the work that President Biden set out to do. There are still things that he wants to accomplish. I mentioned that he's going next week to travel to Peru and to Brazil to participate in these summits with other world leaders. And so the administration has taken the position that they're not out of office until they're out of office. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's 10 weeks or 72 days, however you said it, it's correct. Thank you very much, Aaron, for that. New developments in the battle for Congress. Republicans are hoping to control the House with several races that are waiting to be called at this hour. So join me once again from Capitol Hill with really a very close eye on everything. We have NBC's Julie Sirkin. Let's talk about the Senate races, two of which are still uncalled, Arizona, Pennsylvania. What's the latest in both of those, and what's your sense of why it's taking so long?
Well, why it's taking so long, let's start there. In Arizona and Pennsylvania, it's sort of this perfect storm of a lot of ballots. In the case of Arizona, maybe some issues with tabulating those ballots, maybe missing signatures, other issues that they had to resolve with those voters before counting, especially those early ballots. And in Pennsylvania, it's of course because they can't start counting ballots, even early ones, until polls close on Election Day. Couple that with the fact that these two are the closest, most battleground of battleground Senate races to watch right now. That's why it's taking so long. They want to make sure they get this right. For example, in Pennsylvania, we already had challenges from the McCormick team, the Republican candidate there, challenging incumbent Bob Casey, trying to get their hands on the oversight process of some of these provisional ballots that are still coming in. The Secretary of State in Pennsylvania saying more than 100,000 ballots are still left to count, excuse me. And it's why you're seeing stuff like this from McCormick yesterday, taking his victory lap while Bob Casey's team is saying not so fast. Watch this, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
We knew on election night we had won because the math was clear, and there's no way for Senator Casey to win. And the AP certainly recognized that yesterday by calling the race. But Senator Casey's going to have to work through this. But we got to move on to changing the direction of the country.
I was with Dave McCormick on election night. I could tell you they did not know that they won that night. They were very optimistic, though, especially when the president-elect won Pennsylvania. When Trump won Pennsylvania, it was a good sign for McCormick. But here's what Casey's campaign is saying. There's a new statement that came out this afternoon. Quote, Pennsylvanians deserve to have their voices heard. And as state officials have made clear, counties across Pennsylvania need more time to tabulate remaining ballots. Again, more than 100,000 ballots outstanding. Casey's campaign claims that a lot of those could come from counties that are favorable to the three-term incumbent senator. But McCormick's campaign saying, look, it's not going to change the results. So I guess we'll just see, Alex.
I guess we will see after all the votes are counted. Thank you, Julie Sirkin there on Capitol Hill. With me right now, we have Alexi McCammond, MSNBC political analyst and host of the podcast In Sync with Alexi. And we have Christina Tzintzún Ramirez, president of Next Gen America. Good to have you both back with us. So, Alexi, I'm curious your reaction to this meeting that's coming up. Are you at all surprised that it's happening so quickly, or is this the norm? And I'm curious also what you make of President Biden's reaction to the election overall.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Alex. I think that it's interesting seeing Democrats, President Biden, Vice President Harris sort of saying, let's move on, business as usual, let's move forward. We have seen reporting where some staffers of Harris have sort of said as much, saying that they're confused by the messaging that Trump was a threat to democracy. And now everyone at the top is sort of saying, well, let's just move forward and kind of normalize this. It is interesting that the clear threats posed by Donald Trump to the country are no longer at the top of what President Biden or Vice President Harris are saying. That said, Democrats have never been the party to stoop to Trump's behavior, to change decorum or the way that things are done peacefully and respectfully because of the way that Trump operates. And so that's certainly admirable. But I do think it is surprising how quickly it's happening.
Well, I think maybe in the shock, the aftermath, or just looking at the counting of the numbers, the votes, they won fair and square. You have to give that to them. But when it comes to issues, Christina, as the Trump transition team, works on plans to carry out mass deportations, as he has pledged to do, we've got some new exclusive NBC News reporting that they are considering ending 2 Biden administration programs which allowed more than 1 million immigrants to legally enter the U.S. It could cause hundreds of thousands of those immigrants to face deportation if they've not been formally given asylum. So talk about the impact of that, not only for those families, but for the country as a whole.
Well, I think people have to remember that J.D. Vance has said that even Haitian immigrants that are legally allowed in the United States, amongst other groups that have legal status to be here, that they want to revoke them from having that legal status. They have questioned the legality of all kinds of programs. And then if you look at people behind the Trump administration, like Stephen Miller, who helped guide the last administration's most draconian policies, where we saw immigrant children being ripped from their mothers, raids across communities that spread terror across mixed status families, that they're also trying to stop what they call, the majority becoming people of color in the country. They want to maintain a white majority. So people have to also understand it from that lens. This, again, is not just about those that are undocumented. This is about trying to change the demographics. When Trump was in office, they also did things like say they wanted to get rid of birthright citizenship, that they wanted to change how the census was done. So whether it's undercounting immigrants and their children in the U.S. Census, trying to shift who is legal in the United States, or going after undocumented immigrants, people in the American public need to know this is an attempt to keep a white majority by the white supremacist wing of the Donald Trump campaign and party.
So that brings me to this question to you, Christina. One of the biggest headlines of this election is Trump's gains with Latino voters, a 14-point jump from 2020. That's according to our exit polls. Why that group in particular? What did Democrats miss or take for granted, potentially? And what do they need to change in the future?
Right. I think there's 2 components. One, a lot of Latinos are immigrants or come from immigrant families, and then other Latinos have been in the United States since the United States was even a country. But what we saw, and I can tell you, I live here in Texas, where 1 in 5 Latinos live, where they made a lot of ground. Latinos, we are one of the most poor demographics in the United States. So a huge percentage of us make under $15 an hour. We have twice the national average, that we're likely to be uninsured and not have access to health care. And Donald Trump tapped into and preyed on the Latino population that's incredibly poor. Now, when I talk about seeing a pathway forward, if you look at what Bernie Sanders did in 2020 in the primary,